My name is Vivian Hale. I'm 35. And I used to believe betrayal would announce itself the way movies taught me: raised voices, slammed doors, a confession delivered with tears and shaking hands. I was wrong. Sometimes betrayal shows up in sunlight, at a backyard barbecue, wrapped in networking, just being friendly, and that familiar poison disguised as logic. You don't even realize you're bleeding until you taste it. So here's the setup. I met Ethan when I was 26 and he was 24, fresh out of grad school, hungry, charming, the kind of man who could make a room feel warmer just by walking into it. Back then, he had this way of looking at me like I was the only steady thing in a world that moved too fast. I was a financial analyst with a stable income and a decent apartment, the kind of woman parents describe as a good catch when they think you can't hear them through the kitchen doorway. We dated for years. We moved in together. We built routines, joint accounts, shared calendars, groceries split down the middle, inside jokes. A dog we never got because Ethan wasn't ready for the responsibility. Looking back now, I can admit something I couldn't admit then. I was safe. And Ethan liked safe until he didn't. The signs didn't come with a siren. They came in quiet little changes that were easy to excuse, if you wanted to keep believing your life was what you thought it was. He started putting his phone face down on the counter. He started showering the second he came home, like he needed to rinse off the day before he could stand to touch the couch. And he started mentioning Raina from his marketing team. Not once, not twice, constantly. When your boyfriend says the same woman's name 15 times in 3 days, you notice. When he's suddenly working late every Tuesday and Thursday until 8 or 9, you definitely notice. But I didn't say anything at first. I told myself he was stressed, that marketing campaigns ran late, that deadlines were real, that love meant giving someone room to breathe. I packed his lunch on those late nights sometimes, kissed him on the cheek, told him I was proud of him. Like an idiot. The barbecue was at his department head's place in North Phoenix. Ethan spent nearly an hour getting ready. He changed shirts twice, styled his hair like he was going to a photo shoot, sprayed cologne like he wanted it to linger in someone else's memory. I threw on jeans and a simple top, minimal makeup, ponytail. We were supposed to be going to a work barbecue, not auditioning for a second life. We drove separately because Ethan said he might stay late to help clean up afterward. That should have been my first red flag of the day, the kind you don't see as a warning until you're already standing in the wreckage. We walked into the backyard around 2. And within 90 seconds, Ethan had locked onto Raina like the rest of the party didn't exist. He made some excuse about saying hi to his team, then practically speed-walked straight to her. Raina was exactly what you'd expect. Early 30s. Perfect blowout. The kind of confidence that didn't ask permission. She wore a sundress that looked effortless in a way that was absolutely not effortless. A drink in one hand. Her laugh a little too bright, a little too practiced. And when she saw Ethan, her face lit up like he'd walked in carrying the only oxygen left in the world. Ethan's shoulders relaxed the way they used to relax around me. He smiled, wide, eager, boyish. And then he touched her arm within 5 seconds. Not a handshake, not a casual pat. A linger. A familiarity. I stood there for a moment with a polite smile glued to my face, watching something inside my chest tighten like a knot being pulled. Over the next 2 hours, I watched it unfold. Ethan laughing at everything Raina said, leaning in when she whispered something, like her words were meant for his skin, brushing his fingers over her forearm when he made a point, letting her stand too close, letting her belong there, like I was the extra. I tried joining their conversation 4 separate times. Every time, Ethan interrupted me or redirected the subject. Once, he actually spoke over me mid-sentence and kept going, like my voice had been a glitch in the background noise. When I mentioned checking out the food, he rolled his eyes. Actually, rolled them, like I was a child pulling on his sleeve. I walked away and grabbed a drink. I stood by the fence, the sun warm on my shoulders, and felt something cold settle behind my ribs. From a distance, Ethan looked like a man without a girlfriend. He looked free, and the worst part? He looked happy. After a while, another colleague joined their little circle. Raina immediately introduced herself with that polished smile, and Ethan, who used to introduce me with pride, started talking about her like she was a prize. Her promotion, her new territory, how driven she was. Then he gestured at me, 2 fingers, like I was a coat rack, and said, "And this is my girlfriend. Not my name, not what I do, not Vivienne, just my girlfriend." Like I was furniture he'd picked out years ago and stopped noticing. Something in me went quiet. Not angry, not loud, quiet. The kind of quiet that happens right before something breaks cleanly in half. I watched the other colleague's eyes flick to me with an awkward sympathy. Watched Raina's smile tighten, just a hair, like she'd won something and didn't want to look too pleased about it. The party went on around us. Music, laughter, plates clinking, someone shouting about cornhole. But all I could hear was my own heartbeat. After another hour, I decided to test something. I walked back over and said carefully, "I'm thinking about heading home. I have an early start tomorrow." Ethan stared at me like I'd suggested we set the house on fire. "Why?" he asked sharp. "Just grab another drink. Go talk to someone else." "I'd rather talk to my boyfriend." And that's when Ethan stopped pretending. He exhaled like I was exhausting him. "Look," he said, voice low but edged. "I'm in the middle of a conversation." Raina shifted, suddenly fascinated by her cup. I kept my tone calm. "I'm not asking for much. I'm asking for basic respect." Ethan's eyes narrowed, like I'd accused him of something he couldn't afford to admit. "If you're not comfortable with me being social," he said, "maybe you should examine why that bothers you so much." There it was. That slick little pivot. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "Are you okay?" Just the implication that the problem was me. I swallowed once. "I'm comfortable with you being social." He lifted his brows like he'd already decided he'd won. "I'm not comfortable with you flirting," I said. Ethan straightened like the word had slapped him. "I'm not flirting," he snapped. "I'm networking. And if you can't handle that," he added, with a small, defiant smirk, "the door is right there." He pointed, actually pointed, toward the gate that led out to the driveway, the gate where sunlight poured through like a spotlight. I looked at the gate, then at Ethan, then back at the gate. My chest felt strangely steady. A calm I didn't recognize settled over me. "You know what?" I said softly. "You're absolutely right." Ethan blinked, confused, because he'd expected a fight. He'd expected tears. He'd expected me to beg for him to pick me. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out my keys, and started walking. Behind me, his voice rose, sharp, sudden. "Wait, Vivian, where are you going?" I didn't stop. I walked straight through that gate, got into my car, and drove away. In my rearview mirror, Ethan stood there with his mouth slightly open, like he couldn't compute the idea that I'd actually taken him at his word. And Raina? Raina looked like she wanted to disappear. My phone started buzzing before I even hit the freeway. Notifications lighting up the passenger seat like a pulse. I didn't check them. Not yet, because I already knew whatever was waiting on the screen was going to be Ethan trying to rewrite what just happened. And I was done letting him write my reality. I didn't check my phone until I got home. I walked into our house like a ghost, quiet, steady, almost numb. Kicked my shoes off by the door, put my keys in the bowl where they always went, opened the fridge, grabbed a drink, and sat down on the couch like it was any other Thursday. Except my hands were still trembling. My phone sat on the coffee table, screen lighting up every few seconds like a heartbeat that wouldn't slow down. When I finally picked it up, I had 25 messages, all from Ethan. I scrolled through them in order. The first few were pure offense, sharp and angry, like I'd committed a crime. "What was that about? Everyone saw you leave. Do you know how embarrassing that was?" Then, just like I expected, the tone shifted. Less rage, more control, then panic. "Vivienne, can we talk? Are you seriously not going to respond? I'm getting a ride home with Jess." I stared at that last one for a long moment. Jess, his coworker, the same person he'd waved at across the yard like they were old friends. So he'd already lined up a clean exit. I set the phone down and waited. It took about an hour before I heard a car pull into the driveway. The front door slammed hard enough that a picture frame in the hallway rattled. Then footsteps, fast, heavy, straight into the living room. Ethan stormed in like he owned the air. "What is wrong with you?" he demanded. I took a slow sip of my drink. "Nothing's wrong with me." His jaw tightened. "You humiliated me." I didn't blink. "You pointed to the gate and told me the door was right there." His eyes flashed. "That's not what I meant, and you know it." I set the drink down carefully, like I didn't trust my hands. "Really?" I asked, because it sounded pretty specific. Ethan started pacing, the way he did when he wanted to build momentum, like walking in circles could turn his version of the story into fact. "You left in front of my colleagues, he said. People were asking where you went. I had to make something up." I tilted my head. "Why didn't you tell them the truth?" He stopped pacing like I'd slapped him. "Because that makes me look like a terrible boyfriend." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was insane. "And spending 3 hours flirting with another woman while I stand there watching," I said quietly, "makes you look like what exactly?" His face flushed red. "I wasn't flirting," he snapped. "God, Vivian, you are so insecure." There it was, the word that always worked. Insecure. If he could label me as insecure, he wouldn't have to admit anything else. I was networking, Ethan continued, voice rising like he was delivering a TED Talk. Building professional relationships. That's literally part of my job. Networking, I repeated, tasting the lie like metal. Yes. And touching her arm every 30 seconds is part of your job too? His mouth opened, then closed. He pivoted fast, like a man stepping away from thin ice. You're twisting everything, he said. You always do this. You take something normal and turn it into a drama. Am I asked. I stood up slowly. Not angry, not loud. Just present. Because from where I was standing, I said, it looked like you were embarrassed I even existed. That's ridiculous. Is it? My voice stayed calm, even as my throat burned. Because when I tried to join the conversation, you shut me down every single time. Ethan shook his head, like I was a child telling stories. You're making assumptions. I stepped closer, just a few feet away now. And then, I said, when I finally called it out, you didn't reassure me. You didn't apologize. You didn't even pretend to care. His eyes narrowed. You gave me directions to the nearest exit. For a second, his face changed. Not guilt. Annoyance. Like I'd brought up a receipt he didn't want to see. You know what your problem is? He snapped. You don't trust me. I stared at him for a long moment. A healthy relationship requires trust, he added, almost smug now, like he'd delivered the final word. You're right, I said. Ethan blinked, surprised by the agreement. It does. Then I let the silence sit there for a beat, heavy and unmoving. Trust is earned, I continued, not demanded. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. So, he said slowly, you don't trust me? I looked at him. Really looked. At the man I'd shared a bed with, shared bills with, shared years with. And I thought about how easily he'd smiled at another woman like I wasn't standing there. How about this? I said. Should I? The question landed like a glass dropped onto tile. Ethan stared at me. For the first time all night, he didn't have a comeback. His mouth opened slightly, then shut. Then his expression hardened, and he turned away like the conversation offended him. I can't do this right now, he muttered, walking out of the living room. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, then the bedroom door closing. Not softly, not gently, closed like a statement. I didn't go after him. I didn't chase. I didn't beg him to come back downstairs and care. I walked down the hallway and slept in the guest room. Because something inside me had already started moving. Not away from him. Away from the version of me that kept trying to make excuses for a man who didn't respect her. The next morning started with my phone ringing at dawn. I hadn't even finished brushing my teeth when the first call came in. Unknown number. Then another. Then another. By the time I walked downstairs, I had 3 missed calls and a voicemail from Ethan's sister. And when I entered the kitchen, Ethan was already there, standing at the counter, coffee in hand, phone pressed to his ear. His posture was loose, casual, like he was discussing the weather. But his voice was soft and concerned. The voice people trusted. I don't know what's gotten into her lately, he said into the phone, not looking at me. She's been really sensitive. I froze in the doorway. He kept going. Last night, she made this huge scene just because I was talking to a colleague about work stuff. I could hear a woman's voice faintly through the speaker. His mother. Ethan nodded as if she could see him. No, I wasn't flirting, he said, warm and patient. You know me, I'm just friendly. But she acted like I was doing something terrible. I felt something in my chest go cold. Not heartbreak. Recognition. This wasn't him reacting. This was him controlling the narrative. He finally glanced up and noticed me. For half a second, his eyes flickered, like he hadn't expected me to hear. Then he lowered his voice. Listen, I should go, he murmured into the phone. Yeah, I think she might have some issues she needs to work through. I stood there perfectly still while he hung up. Then he turned to me with a forced brightness that didn't reach his eyes. Good morning, he said. Coffee's fresh. I walked over and poured myself a cup without answering. Ethan leaned on the counter like he was about to offer a solution. So, he began, I was thinking... I waited. Maybe you should talk to someone, he said carefully. Like, professionally. Work through some of these trust issues. My hand tightened around the mug. These trust issues? I repeated. He blinked. Yeah, he said. I mean yours. I let out a short breath that almost turned into a laugh. You want me to see a therapist because you flirted with another woman for 3 hours? His eyes sharpened. I want us to work on our communication, he corrected. You left. You didn't talk. You just stormed out. I didn't storm out, I said. I followed your instructions. Ethan's phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it, and I watched his face shift. Quick, instinctive. That little flash of pleasure, that little private light. He turned the phone screen away slightly as he picked it up. Then he smiled. "Oh," he said, too casual. "It's my mom again. She's really worried about us." He answered before I could respond. And within seconds, he was walking into the living room, voice dropping into that same practiced tone. The same script. The same gentle victim routine. I stood in the kitchen holding my coffee, staring at the spot he'd just been. And suddenly, I understood something with horrifying clarity. He wasn't going to apologize. He wasn't going to take responsibility. He was going to do what he always did when confronted with consequences. He was going to make sure everyone else believed I was the problem. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Another unknown number. I answered. A man's voice, polite, hesitant. "Vivian," he asked. "It's Tom." Tom, Ethan's brother-in-law, his sister's husband. I closed my eyes for a second. "Hi, Tom," I said evenly. He cleared his throat. Paula called us last night. She said you two had a situation." That's one word for it. Tom tried to laugh, but it died quickly. "She said Ethan was just networking and you got upset." I stared at the wall, feeling my jaw tighten. "Is that the official story now?" I asked. Tom paused. "I'm just trying to understand," he said carefully. "Ethan can be outgoing, but he's always been like that. It doesn't mean anything." "It means something to me," I said. Tom sighed. "Maybe you could give him some slack. The whole family is kind of freaking out." I took a breath. Then I asked the question I already knew the answer to. "Tom," I said, "if Paula spent 3 hours at a party ignoring you, flirting with another man, and then told you the door was right there when you complained, what would you do?" Silence. Longer than before. Then a small, uncomfortable sound. Tom began, then stopped. "That's different," he finally said. I felt my lips pressed together. "How?" I asked. Tom's voice dropped. Because Ethan's just friendly." I let the silence sit there. Then I said softly, "Right." And I hung up. I stood in my kitchen for a long moment after that call, phone still in my hand. The house was quiet except for Ethan's voice murmuring in the living room, continuing his campaign. And in that moment, something inside me settled. Not into sadness, into decision. Because one thing was suddenly very, very clear. This relationship wasn't falling apart. It had already cracked. And Ethan wasn't trying to fix it. He was trying to make sure, when it broke completely, everyone blamed me for the sound. Something changed after that morning. Not in a dramatic way. In a calculated one. Ethan didn't yell again. He didn't accuse me of being insecure anymore. He didn't even bring up the barbecue. Instead, he pivoted. Hard. That night, when he came home from work, he walked into the kitchen carrying takeout from my favorite place, the one he always said was too expensive for regular dinners. "I figured you might not feel like cooking," he said lightly. I looked at the bag, then at him. "Thanks," I said. He smiled like he'd just scored a point. Dinner was quiet but pleasant. He asked about my day, listened, nodded, didn't interrupt. Later, we watched a show he knew I liked, even though he'd called it boring before. He laughed at the right moments, sat close, let his arm rest against mine like it was an accident. If someone had walked in, they would have thought we were fine. More than fine. They would have thought I'd imagined everything. Over the next few days, the pattern continued. Ethan cooked dinner twice. Real dinners, not rushed pasta or frozen food. He cleaned the kitchen without being asked. He texted during the day just to check in. "Hope your meeting went well. Thinking about you." On Wednesday, he suggested we take a weekend trip. "Sedona," he said casually. "Just us. Reset a little." Reset. Like we were a frozen phone that needed restarting. I nodded. "We'll see." He leaned in and kissed my temple. Soft, familiar, and completely strategic. Because this wasn't remorse. This was damage control. I could feel it in the way his apologies never lingered on specifics. He never said her name, never revisited the details, never asked what I needed to feel safe again. He just wanted things to go back to normal. And for a few days, I played along. I smiled. I responded. I ate the dinners. I let him touch my arm. I laughed at a joke that wasn't that funny. But inside, I was already gone. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And I'd seen it clearly now. First came dismissal, then gaslighting, then the victim narrative, and finally, when that didn't work, affection. Like flipping through pages in a manual titled How to Avoid Consequences. So while Ethan was busy performing the role of the attentive boyfriend, I was preparing. Quietly, carefully, the way people do when they know they're standing on a fault line. We shared finances, joint account, bills auto-drafted, rent pulled monthly, a savings account we'd built together, supposedly for our future. Ethan barely checked it. That had always been my job. So I started making changes. Not dramatic ones. Small, reasonable, documented. 3,000 here, 2,500 there. I transferred money into a personal account I'd opened years ago, but never used. I left enough in the joint account to cover every bill, every subscription, every expense. I wasn't stealing. I was protecting myself. And I documented everything. Dates, amounts, screenshots, explanations. I built a spreadsheet with a timeline. Nothing emotional, nothing exaggerated, just facts. June, late nights increased. July, phone behavior changed. August, barbecue. I wrote it like a report, because that's what it felt like, building a case against a life I no longer trusted. I made copies of everything. Bank statements, lease documents, insurance policies, titles, even emails. I stored them in a folder at my friend Lila's place, someone Ethan barely knew, someone he'd never think to ask. At night, I lay next to him and stared at the ceiling while he slept easily beside me. Sometimes his phone buzzed late. He always turned the screen away before checking it. I noticed. I didn't say anything. Not because I was afraid. Because I was waiting. The name kept coming up. Raina. Not from Ethan. He'd stopped mentioning her completely. But from the edges of things. A mutual friend asked casually if Ethan still worked closely with that girl from marketing. A coworker of mine mentioned she'd seen Ethan tagged in a company post, standing next to a woman I recognized instantly. The same dress from the barbecue. The same smile. Too familiar. And then, one night, while Ethan was in the shower, his phone lit up on the nightstand. Face down. Buzzing. Once. Then again. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. Because the screen lit up just enough for me to see the preview. Raina, I still can't believe you said that to her. My stomach dropped. Not because of the message itself, but because of what it confirmed. This wasn't new. This wasn't random. This wasn't harmless flirting that went too far at a party. This was something with a history. Something with context. Something that existed before me, or at least outside of me. And suddenly, the way they moved around each other at the barbecue made horrible sense. The comfort, the ease, the way they didn't need to explain anything. They weren't starting something. They were continuing it. When Ethan came out of the shower, I was sitting on the bed scrolling my own phone. He dried his hair, climbed in beside me, and wrapped an arm around my waist. Everything okay? He asked softly. I nodded. Just tired. He kissed my shoulder. Get some sleep. I did, but not the kind he thought. 3 weeks after the barbecue, on a Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting at my desk when an email notification popped up. I almost ignored it. Almost. The subject line froze me in place. About your boyfriend and my wife. I stared at it for a long moment, my pulse roaring in my ears. Unknown sender. No emojis, no drama. Just truth. My fingers hovered over the mouse. Then I clicked. The email was short. Direct. The sender introduced himself. Said he didn't know if I knew who he was, but he was married to Raina, the woman from Ethan's marketing department. Said he'd found something on his wife's iPad the night before. Said it hadn't been easy to send this. Said it probably wouldn't be easy for me to read, but I deserved to know. At the bottom, he'd left his phone number. My hands were shaking now. Not violently, steadily, the kind of shaking that comes when the last piece clicks into place. I closed my laptop, stood up, walked to the bathroom, and locked the door. Then I dialed the number. He answered on the first ring. Is this Vivian? He asked. Yes, I said. My voice sounded far away, even to me. What's going on? There was a pause on the other end. Then he said quietly, I'm going to text you some screenshots. I need you to look at all of them, every one. I swallowed. Okay. After that, he continued, call me back. Then he hung up. 5 seconds later, my phone buzzed. I opened the first image, and everything I'd been bracing for, everything I'd suspected, finally stepped out of the shadows. The first screenshot was a text thread. Ethan's number at the top. Raina's name underneath it. The date stamped in the corner made my chest tighten. August 10th, 1 week before the barbecue. Raina, last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about it. Ethan. Same. When can we do it again? Raina. Friday works. Same place. Ethan. Perfect. I'll tell her I'm working late on the campaign. I felt the room tilt. Not spin. Tilt. Like the ground had shifted just enough to remind me it was never stable to begin with. I scrolled. Another screenshot. Ethan. Does your husband suspect anything? Raina. He asked a couple questions, but he's too passive to do anything about it. Raina. I've got him trained. LOL. My throat closed. Another. Plans for hotel rooms in Scottsdale. Another. Complaints about how boring I'd become. Another. Laughing about how easy it was to hide. And then the message that snapped something inside me clean in half. Raina. She asked me if everything was okay yesterday. Raina. I told her she was being paranoid and needed to trust me more. Raina. She actually apologized. Raina. LOL. Ethan. That's why I'm with someone safe. Ethan. She'll never leave. I stopped scrolling. My hands were shaking so badly now that I had to set the phone down on the bathroom counter. I leaned forward, bracing myself against the sink. 3 months. June, July, August. Every Tuesday, every Thursday. Every late night, he'd come home smelling like hotel soap and cologne. Every lunch I'd packed. Every kiss on the cheek before he walked out the door. Every time I'd convinced myself I was being ridiculous for feeling uneasy. I picked the phone back up. Scrolled further. There were more screenshots than I could count. Explicit messages. Photos they'd sent each other. Voice notes. Raina laughing softly while Ethan murmured something I didn't want to hear. It wasn't just sex. It was intimacy. Shared jokes. Shared contempt. A parallel relationship running underneath my life like a rot I'd refused to smell. I forced myself to keep looking. Because once you open the door, you don't get to pretend you didn't see what was inside. When I reached the end, my phone buzzed. The man's name lit up on the screen. I answered. You saw them, he said. Yes. My voice sounded steady. Too steady. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I know that doesn't help, but you deserve to know. How did you find them? I asked. He exhaled. She left her iPad on the kitchen counter. I was looking up a recipe. Messages were open. He paused. I saw Ethan's name. The preview wasn't professional. I closed my eyes. Does she know you know? I asked. Oh, yeah, he said. I confronted her last night. She tried to lie at first. Then she minimized it. Then she cried. I pictured it perfectly. The pivot. The performance. She begged me not to tell you, he continued. Said it would destroy everything. I almost laughed. She already did, I said. He was quiet for a moment. I'm filing for divorce today, he said finally. Already talked to a lawyer. I wanted to make sure you had everything before you decided what to do. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. We stayed on the phone for another 30 minutes. He sent everything. Full message threads, metadata, dates, times, even a voicemail Ethan had left Raina when he thought I was asleep. The man told me he'd spent the entire night compiling it all, organizing it by date while his wife slept in the next room. When we hung up, I didn't move. I sat in my car in this parking garage beneath my office for 40 minutes. Just sat there, scrolling, reading, letting the truth settle into my bones. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a lapse in judgment. This was a choice made again and again, with full awareness. And suddenly, Ethan's behavior at the barbecue made horrifying sense. He hadn't been reckless. He'd been confident. Because he believed what he wrote in those messages. That I was safe. That I'd never leave. By the time I started the car, I knew exactly what I had to do. I drove straight to a lawyer's office. Didn't go home. Didn't confront him. Didn't scream or cry or throw anything. I found a firm with solid reviews and called from the parking lot. I need an emergency consultation, I said. Relationship separation. Shared assets. They squeezed me in at 5. The lawyer's name was Martin Cole. Mid-50s, sharp suit, calm eyes. He listened without interrupting. Looked at the screenshots. Nodded once. Do you want to end this? He asked. Or do you want leverage? I didn't hesitate. I want out, I said, and I want it clean. He leaned back. Then we moved fast. We spent 3 hours going over everything. Accounts, lease, assets, documentation. I showed him my spreadsheet, the timeline, the transfers. He studied it carefully. This is smart, he said. You protected yourself without crossing legal lines. How fast can we act? I asked. I can have papers ready by Thursday, he said. We can serve him the same day. I nodded. At work. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Legal, he said. Aggressive, but legal. He humiliated me at his company barbecue, I said evenly. I want him to feel that. Martin studied me for a moment. Then he smiled. Thursday afternoon? He asked. That's when his department has their weekly team meeting, I said. Everyone's in the conference room. Martin chuckled softly. Consider it done. I left his office with a plan. Tuesday and Wednesday, I acted normal. Ethan was still in his attentive boyfriend phase. Cooked dinner. Asked about my day. Talked about Sedona again. I smiled. I nodded. I let him believe the performance was working. Wednesday night, he tried to initiate. I told him I was tired. He looked disappointed but didn't push it. Went to bed around 11. I stayed up until 2, organizing documents. Thursday morning, I left for work at 7:30. Ethan was still asleep. I didn't wake him. At 2:40 p.m., my phone buzzed. Process server. Package delivered. Target looked like he'd seen a ghost. I exhaled for the first time all day. 3 minutes later, my phone started ringing. Ethan. I watched it buzz. Sent it to voicemail. It rang again. Voicemail. By 3:30, I had 11 missed calls and 7 voicemails. I listened to them in order. The first one was confusion. Vivian, what is this? Call me back right now. The second was anger. I can't believe you did this at work. My boss pulled me into her office. The third was panic. We need to talk about this like adults. This is insane. The fourth was bargaining. Please, we can fix this. The last one was cold. Fine, don't call me, but you're making a huge mistake. I didn't call back. I sent one text. Your things will be on the porch by Sunday. Locks are getting changed tomorrow. My phone immediately rang again. I declined it. Then the texts started flooding in. I put my phone on silent, ordered another coffee, and waited. By the time I got home that evening, Ethan's car was already in the driveway. The locks had been changed. The new keys were waiting for me in the mailbox, just like Martin said they would be. I stood there for a second with my hand on the mailbox, feeling the weight of the moment settle into my shoulders. This wasn't dramatic. There was no music swelling, no one watching. Just me, and a line I was finally drawing. I walked inside. Ethan was sitting on the couch like he'd been placed there, hands clasped, knees bouncing, eyes red and unfocused. His phone lay face down on the coffee table, finally silent. He stood up the moment he saw me. We need to talk, he said. No, I replied calmly. You need to leave. His mouth fell open. This is my house too, he said automatically. Not right now, I said. There's a motion filed for exclusive use. You'll get your share when everything's settled. Until then, you don't live here. You can't just... I already did. His face crumpled in real time. Vivian, he said, voice breaking. I made a mistake. I didn't respond. A huge one, he added quickly. But people work through this. Couples survive worse. You slept with your ex-girlfriend for 3 months, I said. You lied to my face. You mocked me for trusting you. And when I noticed something was wrong, you told me I was paranoid. He went pale. How do you... Doesn't matter, I said. What matters is that I know everything. His eyes filled with tears. I don't know what I was thinking, he whispered. I was scared. I felt stuck. It didn't mean anything. It meant enough to destroy us, I said. He stepped toward me. I love you. No, I said. You love being able to do whatever you wanted without consequences. I checked my watch. You have 5 minutes to grab what you need for tonight. After that, I'm calling the police. His hands trembled. You're really doing this, he said. You're ending everything. You ended it months ago, I replied. Ethan went upstairs. He came back down 10 minutes later with an overnight bag and his laptop. He stopped at the door, turned back, and looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. I'll fight for us, he said softly. You'll see. The papers are already filed, I said. Leave your key. He placed it on the counter. Then he walked out. I watched from the window as he sat in his car for a long time, head in his hands, shoulders shaking. Eventually, the engine started, and he drove away. My phone rang almost immediately. His sister, I answered. What did you do? She shouted. You served him at work, in front of everyone? Yes, I said. That was cruel. You know what's cruel? I replied. Cheating for 3 months and gaslighting someone when they start asking questions. You didn't have to humiliate him. He humiliated me first. She went quiet. He's devastated. Good, I said. Tell him to have his lawyer contact mine. Then I hung up and blocked her number. The rest of the night passed in silence. I ordered takeout, watched something mindless, went to bed around 11. I slept better than I had in months. By Friday morning, the fallout was spreading. I heard it through a mutual friend. Ethan had been pulled into an emergency HR meeting. Raina's husband had filed for divorce the same day Ethan was served. The timing wasn't subtle. Raina was suddenly out sick. Ethan wasn't. He was placed on administrative leave by noon. My phone had 53 missed calls by the time I turned it back on. Most from Ethan. A few from his mother. One from an unfamiliar number that turned out to be his boss, politely asking me not to discuss the situation publicly. I didn't respond. The only call I returned was his father's. You filed, he said quietly. Yes, he sighed. I can't say I blame you. You're proof. It explains a lot. I closed my eyes. His mother's defending him, he added. But that doesn't change what he did. Thank you, I said. You deserve better, he replied. That meant more than I expected. By Sunday morning, Ethan's things were boxed up on the porch. Clothes, shoes, electronics, kitchen items, everything I'd promised. He showed up with his sister to collect them. I watched from the window as they loaded the car. Ethan kept glancing at the house like he expected me to appear. I didn't. When they left, only one box remained. Inside it were the sentimental things. Photos, cards, the frame picture from our first trip together. I carried it to the dumpster. Didn't hesitate. The separation process moved fast. Ethan's lawyer tried pushing for mediation. Martin shut it down with evidence. Screenshots, metadata, timelines. After that, there were no more delays. By the time everything was finalized, 4 months had passed. Ethan lost his job shortly after. Raina transferred departments but carried the kind of reputation that follows you into every room. They didn't end up together. Turns out secrecy isn't a solid foundation. I moved into a small apartment downtown, 1 bedroom, floor-to-ceiling windows, no shared memories hiding in corners. 2 weeks after everything was official, someone knocked on my door. I looked through the peephole. It was Ethan? Thinner, tired, unrecognizable. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. "What do you want?" I asked. He swallowed. 5 minutes, he said. That's all. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. He looked around the apartment slowly. "Nice place," he murmured. Then he turned to me. "I miss you." I didn't answer. "I miss us," he continued. "I destroyed the best thing in my life." "You made choices," I said. "This is the result." "I lost my job," he said suddenly. "Everything fell apart." "It fell apart because you burned it down," I replied. His eyes filled. "I've changed," he whispered. "Please, just give me another chance." I looked at him for a long moment. "No," I said. He stared at me like he couldn't believe it. "You didn't just cheat," I continued. "You made me doubt my reality. You made me apologize when I was right." I walked to the door and opened it. "You told me the door was right there," I said evenly. "Here it is again." He didn't move. "Leave," I said. He stepped into the hallway, tears running down his face. I closed the door. And for the first time since that barbecue, I felt free. I stood there for a moment after closing the door. Not shaking, not crying. Just still. The apartment was quiet in a way my old house never had been. No shared clocks ticking in different rooms. No second phone buzzing on a nightstand. No low-grade tension humming under every surface. Just silence. And for the first time in months, it didn't scare me. Ethan stayed in the hallway for a long time. I know because I checked the peephole once, against my better judgment. He stood there with his forehead pressed to the wall, shoulders slumped, like a man finally realizing there was no audience left to convince. Then, eventually, he left. I didn't follow him. I didn't open the door again. I didn't need closure. I already had it. The weeks after that were quieter than I expected. No dramatic confrontations, no surprise messages, no late-night apologies dripping with regret. Just distance. I heard things through mutual friends, not because I asked, but because people talk when a story burns hot enough. Ethan lost his job officially 2 weeks after our separation was finalized. Downsizing, on paper. Everyone knew the truth. Raina stayed another month before transferring to a different department across town. It didn't help. Reputations don't reset just because your email signature changes. They never became a couple. Apparently, once secrecy was gone, so was whatever illusion had kept them interested. I heard Ethan tried reaching out to her after everything collapsed. She blocked him. I won't lie, there was a small, dark satisfaction in that. Not joy, just symmetry. 4 months after the papers were signed, the divorce finalized, and the dust settled, I got the email. Subject, final decree. Congratulations on your fresh start. I stared at it longer than I needed to. Then I closed my laptop and went out to dinner by myself. Steak, a glass of red wine. Sat at the bar and watched a basketball game I didn't even care about. And halfway through the meal, I realized something strange. I was breathing easily. Not carefully. Not defensively. Easily. A few weeks later, I moved again. Sold my share of the old place and bought something smaller on the edge of Scottsdale. 2 bedrooms, a little yard, a pool I didn't need but liked having anyway. I adopted a rescue dog. A mutt with one ear that never stood up and absolutely no interest in fetch. He preferred sleeping with his head on my foot like he was guarding something important. Peace, it turns out, can look like a quiet afternoon and a dog who doesn't ask questions. Sometimes people ask if I regret how I handled it. Serving him at work, changing the locks, walking away without talking it out. They ask it gently, like they expect me to soften. I don't, because here's the thing no one likes to admit. The affair wasn't the moment it ended. The gaslighting was. The second he told me I was insecure instead of listening. The second he pointed to a door instead of choosing respect. All I did was walk through it. Twice. I don't hate Ethan. I don't love him either. He's just someone who taught me a lesson I'll never forget. When someone shows you exactly who they are under pressure, when they rewrite reality to protect themselves, when they try to make you smaller so they can stay comfortable, you don't argue. You don't beg. You don't wait for them to change. You leave. and you don't look back. Because the door they offer you as a threat, sometimes it's actually an exit.